Tonight, after months of controversy, Sir Keir Starmer lands in China on a mission to boost trade and growth.
It's 8 years since a British Prime Minister stepped on Chinese soil. And so on this delegation, you're making history.
Far from making history, the Tory leader says the Prime Minister is making a mistake in going as concerns about national security and human rights continue. It may not quite be David Cameron down the pub with President Xi, but is the Prime Minister aiming to revive a golden age in UK-China relations? And is China going to get more than it's giving? Also tonight, Kemi Badenoch accuses defectors from her party of having a tantrum dressed up as politics, but distances herself from comments from her party about Suella Braverman's mental health. And with the Prime Minister away, it all got a little bit surreal in the Commons at PMQs, with David Lammy poking fun at what he called the Tory transfer window to join Reform. We've locked our panel in with a lucrative long-term deal. Sir Ranald Jayawardena and Kirsty Blackman will be with me for the next hour, at least. It is Wednesday. I'm Matt Barbet, live from Westminster. This is the Politics Hub. Good evening. It's been months in the planning, and at one point it looked like it might never happen because of ongoing concerns about national security. But today, the Prime Minister's controversial trip to China finally got underway. So just how is a self-described British pragmatist going to get on with a self-appointed Chinese communist? When we landed this morning, Keir Starmer became the first Prime Minister to visit since 2018, with his central priority to boost trade between the two nations and deliver economic growth back here in the UK. Others are more cynical, with the PM accused of going cap in hand to a regime accused of spying on the UK. So what does China want, and is the political risk being taken by Britain worth the potential economic rewards? We'll be getting the opinion of some top China experts on the Politics Hub. But first, here's our political editor, Beth Rigby, who is travelling with the PM and sent us this update a bit earlier.
Well, look, the Prime Minister just addressed his near 60-strong delegation of business and cultural leaders in downtown Beijing, and he told them that they are making history by making this trip with him. And indeed, it is a historic moment in some ways. He's the first Prime Minister to come to China in 8 years. The last one was Theresa May. And since her visit, relations have cooled somewhat. Well, this is a moment where a Prime Minister is trying to have a strategic reset. And what it's all about the economy. China is the second largest economy in the world. It's our third biggest trading partner. It supports over 300,000 jobs in the UK. They are all the messages Downing Street are trying to get out about this trip as they come here to try and improve trade ties, to increase investment in the UK and also trade with China. And it's all about, as the Prime Minister told that delegation, trying to deliver for people back home. And he keeps coming back to the issue of the cost of living because you know and I know he doesn't much like that tag, never hear Keir. So he's trying to make these international trips and make the point that it's to deliver on the economy back home. But look, it's full of challenges. It's tricky around President Trump. When Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, came here and had some trade deals, Trump responded by threatening 100% tariffs on Canada. He got very prickly about it. Indeed, the Prime Minister says that there is a special relationship with the US and he still has to try and work with China. He said there's no point putting your head in the sand. We have to note where there might be differences, but go for opportunities too. There's also tricky issues on the matter of human rights. Jimmy Lai, the Hong Kong activist, imprisoned at the moment. There'll be questions about that, questions about the fate and the plight of the Uyghurs. All of these questions are tricky for Keir Starmer. He's also going to be asked about Chinese investment in critical infrastructure. And arriving here in Beijing, he says he doesn't want to get ahead of things. He's got a key bilateral tomorrow with President Xi, and he really needs that to go well.
A lot has changed since Xi Jinping was given the red carpet treatment on his trip to the UK 11 years ago. I'm warning, there's some flash photography coming up. The Chinese leader was taken on a trip down the pub by the then Prime Minister David Cameron. They enjoyed a fish and chips supper, washed down with a pint in the pub near Chequers, toasting a golden era in UK-China relations. In 2018, the beer was swapped for a different brew when Theresa May visited Beijing. She was welcomed by President Xi with a Chinese tea-drinking ceremony, but the cracks were already appearing as May banned Chinese firm Huawei from providing core parts of the mobile network in the UK. A few years later, this.
Now let's be clear, the so-called golden era is over, along with the naive idea that trade would automatically lead to social and political reform. But nor should we rely on simplistic Cold War rhetoric. We recognise China poses a systemic challenge to our values and interests.
Fast forward to 2026, Sir Keir Starmer's visit to China comes amid a rather large row over permission for a rather large Chinese super embassy in central London, amid warnings this building could be a security risk. Plus, the recently collapsed trial of 2 alleged Chinese spies in Parliament as well. And there are continuing concerns over China's human rights record, as Beth mentioned, particularly in regard to the recent imprisonment of British citizen Jimmy Lai. Arriving in Beijing, Keir Starmer had this upbeat message for the British delegation.
They say that 8 days is a long time in politics. Try 8 years, because it's 8 years since a British Prime Minister stepped on Chinese soil. And so on this delegation, you're making history. You're part of the change that we're bringing about.
Back home, the Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch questioned whether, given the security threats, the PM should be travelling to China at all.
You asked, would I be going to China? No, not now, because I don't think that this is the time to do that. We need to be talking to those other countries who are worried about the threat China is posing to them. When I was Trade Secretary at the World Trade Organization, Japan, Australia, Brazil, all suffering economic coercion, European countries. We should be talking more to those countries who are aligned with our interests, not the country that is doing everything it can to undermine our economy. I think that that is what a Prime Minister should be talking about, and he needs to show strength, not approving a super embassy, which many people think is going to become a spy hub. He looks like he gives way every time things get difficult, and that is the difference between Keir Starmer and myself.
So just what type of economic deal can the Prime Minister hope to pull off with this visit? Joining me now to discuss that is Dr. Zhongwan Zoe Liu, Senior Fellow for China Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. Well, Zoe for short, isn't it, Zoe? It's good to see you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. In simple terms, what is China trying to get and what is it prepared to give?
Thank you, Matt, for having me. Put in simple terms, China's goal has never changed, especially under President Xi Jinping. Its goal is to pursue self-sufficiency or self-reliance, both in terms of economic, technology, finance, and security. So from that perspective, any deal that China will be able to strike with the UK is going to be fundamentally based upon the goal of strengthening China's ability to pursue self-sufficiency and its ability to have a de facto veto power against Western powers' unilateral action, such as sanctions.
OK, so as you categorise it there, it sounds like it's pretty one-sided, pretty imbalanced.
In a way, yes, it is imbalanced, but things have dramatically changed, not just since when China joined the WTO in December 2001, but in particular since 2017 and 2018. 2017, President Trump visited China, followed by a trade war 1.0, followed by 2018, the global tech campaign against the ZTE and Huawei. And during that time, UK sided with the Trump administration, and viewing from Beijing's point of view, they view the UK government as part of this collective containing China, denying China's rise coalition.
Look, we've seen other countries levying tariffs on China. Let's use EVs as an example, electric vehicles, because it's quite a good one. 100% tariff in the US. more than 30% tariff in the EU, 0% tariff from the UK government. And of course, with the China-Canada trade deal being agreed, their tariff on Chinese EVs is coming down. Where's the movement for the UK if it's already not levying any tariff on Chinese EVs?
Matt, I think EV is a perfect example, and the fact that the UK remains wants zero tariff goes to show Britain still tries to stick to free trade spirit. And on top of that, EV is very much important to the climate transition or green energy transition is part of the infrastructure. And so from that perspective, especially if we only look at consumers, zero tariff is not a bad thing. However, in terms of industrial competitiveness, in terms of generating or promoting or incentivizing investment in UK, making things in the UK, zero tariff may not necessarily be a good policy.
Well, yeah, well, exactly. And already Chinese businesses, the Chinese state owns quite a bit of UK infrastructure, tens of billions of pounds worth. I mean, we already mentioned the Huawei situation, which was denied, but there's no denying the breadth of that investment, both from the government and Chinese companies, that's happening here already. So I guess with that backdrop, Zoe, does it look like the British are going cap in hand to Beijing?
Matt, I think that is a fair assessment in terms of Chinese money, especially money tied with state-owned entities or sovereign funds, their ownership in UK properties. But China is not alone. There are other government-affiliated agencies invested heavily in UK assets, from properties to infrastructure, water facilities, and university dormitories. So from that perspective, I'd say China is one of quite a handful of government who have massive government-owned investment institutions, such as from the Gulf area, to have invested in UK. And this is not necessarily because of UK's relative lack of progress in recent years, but it more comes from two perspectives. The first one is UK has maintained an open economy, open capital market. Secondly, it's also good asset. So putting all this together, this also means that more exposure, perhaps in certain circumstances, give the UK government some leverage, because if you think about how governments are able to impose sanctions, if there is no exposure, you cannot impose sanctions. And if China or any other government never owned asset in the UK, you cannot force them to divest. So from that perspective, I'd say it's a double-edged sword.
Double-edged sword, yes. And another point to finish off on, Zoe, a lot of Western companies in the UK, in the EU, in the US, they fear Chinese effectively stealing their intellectual property, nicking it, copying it, selling it cheaper. I mean, in this delegation of business leaders who've gone with the Prime Minister, one of them is the boss of Brompton, who's talked about this himself. And they sell a lot of their fold-up bikes to China, but worried about those fold-up bikes being copied and sold cheaper, or versions of sold cheaper as well. Is that a valid concern these days?
I think it depends upon sectors, and it depends upon what kind of innovation we are talking about. For a long period of time, yes, it is true that IP protection has been a huge concern for foreign business, especially multinationals operating in China, because China for a long period of time has operated under a system that requires foreign companies to set up joint ventures that would involve technology transfer to their local partners. But on the other hand, in the past decade, especially in the context of EVs, batteries, solar, although China started with illegally obtaining or purchasing foreign IP and then reverse engineering it, but over the past decade, China's own indigenous innovation has dramatically advanced and progressed. And in fact, in perhaps the most cost-effective and the most innovative technologies in solar, in batteries, in EVs, these are in China. Part of the reason is because the West, from UK, Germany, America, we experienced decades of deindustrialization. We shifted our IP, we shifted our manufacturing facilities overseas, and we share our product design. But now this is not. These would I'd say these are the old story. And if we look at business surveys, IP theft is no longer one of the top 10 concerns among multinationals in China.
Interesting, Zoe. Really appreciate getting your point of view on this. That's Dr. Zoe Liu, who's a Senior Fellow for China Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. Thank you very much indeed. Time then to bring in our duo for this evening, Kirsty Blackman, the SNP MP for Aberdeen North and the party's Chief Whip, and the former Conservative Cabinet Minister, Sir Ranil Jayawardena. Good to have you both here. Ranil, what do you think about this trip? And then I'll ask you, Kirsty, as well. Do you think it's worthwhile? Do you think Keir Starmer is picking up the baton that perhaps was left by David Cameron, ignoring what happened in the meantime with Theresa May and others?
So, look, China is a great power. I don't think we can say anything other than that. We can see its economic, military might out there. That's a fact. So, of course, it's a country that needs to be treated with some respect. But there's a difference between respecting a country and having to kowtow to a country. And it's really important, I think, that the British government is clear-eyed on the risks that are posed to us, to our national security, to our daily lives from the Chinese state as it is today. You know, times have changed. David Cameron back then, the assessment was very different to what it is now. And I think any government, Labour, Conservative, whatever it might be, needs to deal with the challenges as they are, not as they might wish them to be. And so whether it is corporate IP theft, which you brought up in that interview, and I've visited businesses when I was Minister for International Trade, they said they'd been ripped off to such an extent that the errors in English had been copied into Mandarin as errors. That's how accurately they were being copied, and that was only 5 years ago, through to thinking through the potential bugging of phones in Downing Street, which has been revealed just this week. You know, there are significant threats that the government should be aware of.
If what Ranil is saying is true, Kirsty, is it a case of keep your friends close and keep your enemies closer then?
I mean, I didn't expect that we would be agreeing so much, but, you know, actually...
Well, you've only just started.
Yeah, so far.
Plenty of time for that. Plenty of time for that.
But actually, I think, you know, it is a really important relationship. It is a really important country. And you're right, and not least because of the economic and the military might, but also just the sheer size of China. Having that relationship is important, but being clear-eyed about what the risks are is really important. I do have massive concerns about the embassy, for example, and the decision-making process that has occurred around that. It does feel like people in government perhaps have not been listening to the risks that have been put before them.
They would say they have, obviously.
I mean, they obviously would say they have.
They say they've weighed it up the planning application. They know about those mysterious rooms at the bottom of the plans and how close they are to these cables as well. So they would say that they've done their due diligence here.
Well, they would say that. But then, you know, if you can't take a jet to China in case it gets a bug on it, an RAF jet, then I don't know how you're going to protect an underground room from accessing cables. So, you know, I'm concerned about that. I think, though, there's a real responsibility when it comes to international relationships in terms of being able to talk about those human rights issues that we see, being able to talk about Jimmy Lai, being able to have those conversations with China and any other country that we see that is abusing human rights. You know, we need to be having, and the leadership in Westminster need to be having those conversations about the Uyghur Muslims, about what is happening there. Yeah. It's really important that those conversations continue to happen, whether it's a country that we are currently getting on with or a country that we're not getting on with. What I want to hear from the Prime Minister when he comes back is not just about the trading relationship, but about how much he pressed the Chinese administration about those human rights abuses.
I do believe Jimmy Lai's son will be speaking to Yalda in the World a bit later on. That's from 9 o'clock. Ranil, back to you. If you have these concerns, Is it the case then that the UK and successive UK governments have sleepwalked into this situation? We heard there Zoe talking about, and me asking her about, how much British infrastructure is either Chinese made or even Chinese owned. Have we just been blinkered to the facts that we are dealing with now?
I think more and more evidence came to the fore. So, for example, Huawei was referenced there, and it became very clear that the technology, and it became clear in time that the technology that was being introduced did allow, in effect, one step removed, the Chinese state, to potentially interfere with our critical national infrastructure.
Yeah.
So it became clear in time, and that's why we've got to respond now that we've got this clarity. And this isn't, and I think Kirsty made the point, it's not a party political point. I think this is a national point. It's a national interest point that we as a country and all political parties have a responsibility. And this also applies in things like the Chagos Islands giveaway. You know, we might disagree on this, but I think the point is the government's got to make decisions knowing the consequences of it. Giving it to an ally of China is deeply irresponsible at this time.
Because here's the difference between China and Britain. China, single-party state, can afford to play a very long game. Britain doesn't do that because of electoral cycles.
Absolutely, and you're completely right. But, you know, that doesn't stop us from having a responsibility when it comes to the international stage. And actually, it doesn't stop us in terms of that critical national infrastructure. We were making the point for a significant number of months before the UK government took any action that China should not be in charge of our CCTV in critical government buildings. And in fact, the Conservative government eventually said, right, OK, we're going to stop this in the CCTV, but only in critical sites. So, you know, there's distinct possibilities that if it's not being assessed as a critical site, you could be walking into that NHS thing and being filmed.
But you and the SNP, just finished off, are not anti-Chinese investment. You've encouraged some Chinese investment in Scotland.
And we're not anti having a relationship with other countries. We're not anti doing. But what I said in terms of my priorities for the Prime Minister's visit and where I think he should be focusing, I think the human rights abuses and the behaviour of China when it comes to things like tapping phones and being involved in that national infrastructure, I think for me that would be the key priorities that I would be putting across if I was Keir Starmer.
Thank you both for the time being. Plenty of time to disagree, so don't worry about that, Kirsty. We can do that later. You are watching the Politics Hub right now on Sky News. Coming up, Kemi Badenoch goes on a recruitment drive as she accuses Tory defectors of, in her words, having a tantrum dressed up as politics.
There's a fresh look to your news from 10 on Sky News.
It's a new show called The Wrap, every night of the week.
We'll still bring you the day's biggest stories,
but with more lively debate,
more in-depth commentary,
and more of what you need to know.
Plus a look at what's making tomorrow's headlines.
The Wrap.
Everything wrapped up for you from 10 on Sky News.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report. And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Following a string of high-profile defections to Reform UK, Kemi Badenoch has been launching a recruitment campaign today for a new Conservative party. The Tory leader said, unlike Reform, which she described as a party full of people who start problems then run away, that she is building a party full of people with answers. She's been speaking to our political correspondent Mari Aurora, who asked her whether she regretted Monday's statement about the latest Tory defector, Suella Braverman, which had referred to the state of her mental health.
On the statement, that statement should never have gone out, and it was retracted immediately as soon as I found out, and the person who did that has been spoken to. That's not the sort of party that I'm running, and what I want people to see is that when we get things wrong, we own up, we apologise, and we do something to fix it. That's the difference between Conservatives and all the other parties. And what I am saying today is a response to the psychodrama we've seen. I'm describing it and saying that is over. The Conservative Party is not interested in that, and anyone who is in the party who is interested in being a drama queen should go so that we can get on with delivering a stronger economy and a stronger country.
But on that statement from around Suella, do you, on a human level, do you personally regret that it went out, even if it was a mistake?
Oh, I've said that already. I said that already. It should not have gone out, and that's why we retracted it. We shouldn't be discussing people's mental health in that way is inappropriate, and that is why the person who sent it out has been spoken to.
Would you like to apologise on behalf of the party to Suella Braverman?
Oh, I've already done that. I think that I'm the only person, actually, who's a party leader who does apologise. Nigel Farage has made comments about his former staff's mental health. That was him, not a spokesman. And I think that between him and Keir Starmer, they both think that they don't do anything wrong. They never apologise when they do something wrong. We do.
On this Andy Street, Ruth Davidson movement, you spoke in your speech about how you are, on the right, and people who aren't on your agenda, well, they're not being helpful. How do you feel about those two essentially telling you how to do your job? And also, for those voters who were appealed by Andy Street and Ruth Davidson, if that's not where you are, then where are they supposed to go?
I want people to know that the Conservative Party is sitting right in the common ground, in the mainstream of politics. Those people can be in the Conservative Party. And I'm very welcoming of people having their own opinions, but I'm the party leader. What I have a problem with is people who have left our party, who are then trying to shape it, whether they've gone to the Liberal Democrats or they've gone to Reform. These people are not Conservatives, and they should not be trying to confuse people about what the Conservative Party stands for. I'm the leader. I'm the one who defines what the Conservative Party stands for. Conservative values, delivering a stronger economy, lower taxes, backing business, making sure that our children have a better future, pushing aspiration, improving education standards, getting kids off social media, delivering stronger borders by leaving the ECHR, and so much more. That's what we're about. These are policies that are firmly on the right, but will appeal to the majority.
So people who are centre-right, do you think you appeal to them? If they think you are too right-wing, where do they go?
I don't think that this is about left or right anymore. It's about right or wrong. And we need to stop fighting the battles of the past. Most people out there want to hear about how their lives are going to be better. And we're showing that we have got a plan. That plan is based on our values. Those values are of the right. We can't be a left-wing party to try and get votes. That's what we did previously in government, and we lost our way. So I'm not repeating those mistakes of the past.
OK, very quickly, you previously said that you were in a listening phase in your Leader of the Opposition job. Are you still in that phase? Are you still listening, or are you on a new chapter? And if so, what's the chapter?
Well, that's how I started my leadership, making sure that we heard what the country thought. And I set out what our agenda was in the autumn at our party conference. We were, of course, always listening, but people want to know what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. How am I going to make lives better for your viewers? What are we going to do? Those people who are struggling to buy or sell a home, abolishing stamp duty, that will help grow the economy. We need to stop the addiction to welfare. This is destroying our economy. We're borrowing to pay welfare. We're not spending enough on defence. We've set out a new welfare plan. We've also set out a sovereign defence fund showing how we're going to invest in our national security. How do we save the high street? Let's abolish business rates for smaller businesses in retail, hospitality and leisure. We now have real ideas, real policies that I think will be attractive to many of your viewers and all those voters out there.
Let's bring in Kirsty and Ranil. Ranil, we'll get on to Tory recruitment in a second. Not tempted to join Reform yourself?
No.
Just clarifying that.
I put it on the record already, and I'll happily confirm that again today.
I'm not planning to join Reform either, just so we're clear.
That's not as well-trodden a path, is it, Kirsty, no. SNP to Reform?
Clearly not.
I mean, it may well happen, you never know. But how do you think Kemi Badenoch has dealt with, A, the defections, and B, this recruitment drive?
Look, so I think the way I've approached this is actually as a matter of sadness. You know, I don't want to see people leave the Conservative Party, so I'm sorry that they've chosen to do so, and maybe in time they'll regret that decision. But, you know, they have every right in a democracy to change their affiliation. They've chosen to do so. I'm not even someone who's calling for them to have a by-election. I believe you elect individuals, and people have left us or come to us in the past, and I stand by that. But I do think that Kemi is right to say that the Conservative Party is the party with solutions, and she's taken time and faced some criticism for it. She took time to come up with some carefully thought through, and indeed, in terms of economic policy, carefully costed policy. She identified £47 billion worth of savings. She then set out what she'd do to help businesses by scrapping business rates on the high street or scrapping stamp duty to help home buyers and home movers. Those are carefully thought through policies. Reform have, to date, set out lovely headlines, but there's no detail on how they'd really solve the problems that this country is facing. And I think that's the big difference right now in British politics, on the right of British politics, that you've got Kemi, who's thought through some of the problems, like on the European Convention on Human Rights. She's had eminent lawyers look through what the solutions might be, and I suspect we'd disagree on this, and that's fine too, because it's a democracy and you don't expect everyone to agree.
No.
But she set that out having thought about it.
Although it is interesting that leaving the ECHR is something that Conservatives and Reform both want to do, as it happens. Whereas, you know, Reform obviously focus on the immigration elements of that.
That's what some people have said makes it so surprising that Suella, Rob and others have chosen to leave when our policy is now to do this. So, you know, people were perhaps surprised that once upon a time when our policy wasn't this, they chose not to leave. Once our policies have become this, they've chosen now as the moment. And that's why Kemi said what she said today.
Kirsty, what do you think?
I mean, I think she's doing the only thing that she can, which is trying to make the best of a bad situation. But we have got this clear path where people are becoming a bit too radical for the Conservatives. I mean, you know, I massively disagree with Conservative policy, even.
I'm sorry to hear that.
So you're shocked and stunned. But you know, that move over to Reform, and Ranil's right. The issue that there is with someone like Nigel Farage, who makes all these statements, but actually is planning to completely decimate our NHS, is, you know, somebody that absolutely cannot and should never be allowed to run public services. There's this bizarre movement from the Conservative Party to Reform, and it just seems like British politics on the right is getting more and more extreme from where it was a few years ago. A few years ago, we were shocked when Theresa May did the go-home vans. You know, that was a shocking thing to happen. Now it would just be normal for where we are.
Interestingly, though, Reform talk about themselves of occupying the right wing, the centre-right wing. They don't see themselves as extreme in the way that you characterise them. And by the way, we don't know what their policy is for things like the health service. We don't know what their policy is on a lot of things. So it may surprise a few people.
They don't see themselves as extreme, but then you have people like their candidate for Manchester, Gordon, saying things like people whose parents were born in the UK, or people who were born in the UK may not be British, you know. So if that's not quite an extreme view, I don't know what is. You know, if you're born here, then
you're British.
Yeah. Or, and actually, I'm very much of the opinion that people who live and work in Scotland, people who come to our country and want to contribute and want to be here, should be allowed to be Scottish if that's what they choose. I'm absolutely of that opinion. You know, we have immigration systems, we have rules. I want a situation where if somebody gets leave to remain, they can absolutely consider themselves Scottish, and it shouldn't be down to where their parents were born.
Thank you both for the time being. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up after this very brief break, we'll return to the PM's three-day visit to Beijing and ask whether UK policy on China is actually driven by, well, ignorance and a bit of fear. We've been talking about the trade deal that Sir Keir Starmer is hoping for in China, but should he actually be doing deals with a country that many consider a security threat to the UK? What does it say when the Prime Minister's team is travelling with burner phones and even flying what's being described as a burner plane? Joining me now is Rana Mitter, Professor of US-Asia Relations at Harvard Kennedy School and co-author of a report entitled Conceptualising a UK-China Engagement Strategy. Rana, good to see you. What would be the executive summary then of that conceptualising that you've done?
I'd say engage with China where it's possible to do so, because the second biggest economy in the world is an entity that you can't simply ignore, not least because so many of the world's supply chains go through China. But be aware that security risks are real. The Chinese are perfectly aware of that, and finding sensible ways to manage that is an important part of the process. The United States, after all, has a very difficult political relationship with China, but the two are massive trading partners with each other. The UK can find ways to be in the same position.
The UK is not the country it used to be. It used to have a bigger economy than China, something like 20 years ago. And we were discussing, Randall, Kirsty and I, as we waited for you to come on, just how the handing back of Hong Kong seemed to cement in some people's minds that Britain is a smaller country than we thought. Is that still the case? And does there need to be a healthy dose of realism when it comes to dealing with China from a British perspective these days?
I'm going to push back against that, actually. I think there are several areas where actually Britain stands pretty tall in the eyes of the Chinese. Just ask Chinese middle-class parents, for instance, when they're placing their child. Remember, many of them still have the famous one-child family policy children, just the one to actually educate. Where in the world they would send their child for an international degree. The United States used to be top of the list. For some, it still is. But now that things are a bit more shaky under the Trump administration, the UK scores very highly. The fact that we have so many Chinese students in the UK is sometimes seen as a source of weakness for universities, but think of it as a source of immense British soft power within China. Or one other example, on the trade visit that Keir Starmer is doing now, there are not one but two CEOs of major pharmaceutical companies, I think GlaxoSmithKline and AstraZeneca specifically. That's because Britain and China have worked together on all sorts of biotech and medical products where actually both sides put into the intellectual property. Now, Britain has to be careful about making sure that it has full value from that intellectual property and that it doesn't all get absorbed by the Chinese side. But the fact that it's Britain that China is working with on that is something that actually shows that when it comes to science, the UK is still capable of operating in the top tier. So let's not talk ourselves down.
Let's talk security, though. I mean, it's one thing taking a burner phone or a burner laptop to China. Flying there on a burner plane, as in one that can't be spied upon when it's sat there on the tarmac, it is entirely different level of mistrust. What do you think?
I think it's fair to say that there is a real dilemma at the heart of China's position in relation to Britain. On the one hand, it's a major trading partner, not as big as the EU, but it is very significant in terms of goods and services. On the other hand, China is a country that wants to increase its global standing and uses techniques that basically go against British security requirements to try and get there. So basically understanding how to navigate that very difficult line is the key thing. I would say if you had to have a sort of one-stop shop on how to do that, increasing the currently quite limited level of knowledge about China in the UK is a really important part of that. Get more people who know about Chinese politics, history, the security issues, and then work out in a nuanced way how you're actually going to be able to navigate those difficult lines. I will say that, of course, it works the other way around. China has spent a very great deal of time getting to know not just the UK, but most Western countries, and it navigates its own red lines with great care. Let's put in the effort to do the same thing.
In which case, Ron, do you think Britain has just been complacent about knowing enough about the place and the people it wants to do business with?
Not complacent, but I think that it's suddenly the new world order, which of course is changing almost day by day, let alone week by week, is something that's taken Britain, like a lot of liberal democratic countries, by surprise. And the centrality of China, particularly to one issue, and let's sort of stick to that one, technology in the 20s and 30s, that's where I think the UK is only just beginning to realize that China is central as a global player. We're talking AI, biotech, quantum. If Britain wants to be a major player, and it should be in these areas, then understanding what China is doing and where it's safe to cooperate and where it is not is going to be a key task. So no complacency, but certainly a lot of learning that needs to be done at high speed.
Let's finish big picture, because you mentioned the shifting new world order. It seems to be happening all the time at the moment. You've got Donald Trump referring to the Monroe Doctrine of the US dominating the Western Hemisphere. I don't know if this is a doctrine in China, but do you think they are dominating the Eastern Hemisphere? Is that just a given right now?
Oh, the Chinese talk about the Monroe Doctrine. They call it Monroe-Jui, Monroeism. But I would say that it's worth remembering that Asia has a lot of countries also that don't want China to dominate. Japan would be one of the best examples, third biggest military in the world, actually a major defense partner of the UK. We're cooperating on areas including, for instance, building new generation fighter jets. So just remember that China is immensely important in Asia. We should spend more time understanding and dealing with China where it's necessary. But Asia is not China full stop. Southeast Asia, Japan, Korea, they all have a big role to play. It's a multifarious place. Britain should engage with all parts of it.
Yes, and the Prime Minister is heading to Japan immediately after this trip to China. I mean, that is going to be an interesting conversation, isn't it, with the new Japanese Prime Minister hot on the heels of being in China with President Xi?
Actually, what he can do with Prime Minister Takaichi Sanae is to say, how do you, Japan, manage actually a very difficult balance, which is having huge economic interests in China. There are large factories run by the Japanese companies like, Matsushita, Panasonic, and so forth on Chinese soil, and yet also maintain a very strict security and defense posture, such that Japan makes sure that when it comes to, say, protection of maritime issues, that its interests are not compromised. Japan has been, navigating these waters, if I may put it that way, for a very, very long time. And Britain can certainly study and learn a great deal from our Japanese partners.
Professor Rana Mitter, pleasure to have you with us here on the Politics Hub. Thank you.
Thank you.
So to come on the show with the PM in China, of course, David Lammy took Deputy Prime Minister's questions. We will find out why he ended up talking about the former England footballer, Sol Campbell.
First Minister, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
Nice to see you. How are you feeling?
Looking forward to getting into the parliamentary chamber.
Are you any further forward to making a decision?
No, it's an important day today.
All of the claims were in line with my parliamentary duties, so I'm making that clear to you, Conor.
He was a Scot through and through.
He was a very good politician.
Alex Salmond was controversial, he was a disruptor, but above all, he was respected.
Will you resign if you lose this week?
Again, I'm not planning to, of course, lose the vote of no confidence. I'm planning to win that vote of no confidence.
His face said it all.
My intention to stand down as party leader.
This is now a storm with deadly consequences. How are they feeling?
They're a bit scared at the minute.
We've been told to evacuate.
How are you feeling?
Devastated.
Hundreds of homes were wiped out by flooding. I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent.
It was probably the darkest time in my life.
Scott is 5 years sober after a cocaine addiction left him close to death. Scotland has a shameful record, worse than England, the worst in Europe.
So why not just say you failed? Because then you might get more respect from families who've lost loved ones.
This is where one of the UK's most prolific rapists thought he'd got away with murder. Sky News can reveal that former sex workers had told police he was sexually violent.
My Emma.
Free wherever you get your news. It's over, isn't it? The Americans say he is Rossi, a fraudster. This has been one of the most bizarre cases ever heard in a courtroom in this country. A dangerous murderer.
Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Andrew Ennis after this?
She said she can forgive him, but as long as he's behind bars.
By doing the right thing, it's destroyed your life.
They terrorised me. They intimidated me.
I'm so grateful.
Sky News. The full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
So with Sir Keir Starmer in China, it was David Lammy taking Deputy Prime Minister's questions in the Commons again today. It's fair to say that things went a bit better for him than last time round, when he ended up having to apologise for dodging questions on an accidental prisoner release. But there were some lively exchanges with the Shadow Business Secretary over the blocking of Andy Burnham and Tory defections to reform.
26 Tory MPs and counting have already defected to reform, and now they're all counting down, Mr. Speaker, because today is 100 days until the Tory transfer window slams shut. It's going to be the longest and most disloyal transfer saga since Sol Campbell left Spurs. And the member for Clapton, I don't know where he is, has signed 3 white ringers in the past fortnight.
Andrew Griffiths.
Thank you. I don't know what's in his head, Mr. Speaker. It's our party that is getting stronger, and overnight, overnight, Mr. Speaker, we learned that the former Deputy Prime Minister has got 80 names. On Sunday, we learned that the Health Secretary's allies claimed that he's got 200 names, and oddly, 50 of them want the Mayor of Greater Manchester, who's not even in this MP.
Mr. Speaker, he's not going to get this gig again, is he? Let's face it. Mr. Speaker, I've set out our position very clearly. This was the week when the leader of the opposition told Desert Islanders that Britain needs to learn to queue again. And Tory MPs have taken her quite literally. They're lining up outside the member for Clapton's office while they squabble about the damage that they did to our country. Labour this week is capping ground rents, cutting the cost of living and rebuilding our public services. That's the difference a Labour government makes, and there's much more to come.
I'm not sure you could have predicted that Sol Campbell would get a mention at PMQs, but he had to pinch himself here in that one. Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is here, along with our duo, Kirsty Blackman and Ranald Jaya-Wardner. What did you make of it? Because there were a couple of little mistakes in there. He was talking about 26 Tory MPs. Well, a lot of them are former MPs. You know, his opposite number talking about Andy Burnham's not at the MP, men in the Commons. It was all a little bit, it wasn't top-notch, let's put it that way.
No, it wasn't A-listers, really,
no, it was not A-listers,
no. Having said that, I mean, last time David Lammy did PMQs, he made a complete hash of it. He forgot his poppy, and as you say, he dodged a question about a prisoner when he probably knew the answer anyway. And there were some stumbles, as we've just heard, from Andrew Griffith. And I think most people probably agreed with David Lammy when he said, well, you're not going to get this gig again, are you? But there were actually a few funny jokes. Oh, I should explain, by the way, for those who don't know,
who Sol Campbell is.
Sol Campbell was the Spurs centre-half, North London club, a hero there, and he went to their deadly rivals Arsenal, caused absolute fury. I wonder if he said that if the PM had been in the chamber, because, of course, he's a big Arsenal fan, was spotted there, the game at the weekend. But there were some quite witty gags, actually, to be fair. I mean, for example, when, I don't think we heard it there, but Andrew Griffiths said, he talked about MPs being barred from pubs, where next? Shops, restaurants, hair salons. Then he said that might not make a difference to him or me. That wasn't bad. And then on Mr Burnham, it was ambitious people like Andy from Manchester. That was quite good. It's also worth mentioning, actually, that Mr Lammy had some quite good gags about Lee Anderson. Yeah. Lee Anderson had a question on the order paper, so the Deputy Prime Minister will have known he was definitely going to be called. He said, first of all, he talked about, this is Lee Anderson, unlike the PM, I've never been thrown out of a pub, but we later learned that he once was. And then he began by saying, it was reported on the TV yesterday, and Labour MP started screaming, you don't pay the TV licence, you haven't got a licence. Anyway, Lee Anderson said, come to Ashfield, visit some pubs. And then Mr Lammy said, quite a subtle way, actually, I once campaigned with you when you were a member of the Labour Party. So that was quite good as well. And then his final gag on that was talking about the Reform Shadow Cabinet, Nadeem Zahawi to advise on tax, Robert Jenrick to open up the borders, and now they need Liz Truss to crash the economy. So some quite good lines from Mr. Lammy. He was looking down there as though somebody had written them for him. I'm not sure they were spontaneous, but all in all, victory for Mr. Lammy, and I don't think Mr. Griffith will get the gig again.
He was also pretty damning about Lee Anderson's IQ, I think.
Yes, that's right.
As well. Kirsty, were you there today?
I was not there today. I'm not a fan of PMQs. How did you miss that? Do you know what? It's just such theatre. And actually, you know, the conversation that we're having just now, hearing about it, let's talk about the gags that happened. You know, that's what PMQs has been reduced to. It's theatre. Nothing gets done. Nobody's even talking about policy. They're just trying to come up with the best joke. So, no, I tend to avoid PMQs if I possibly can.
Is that a little bit po-faced? People want to see the humanity, the humour, I mean, that's British humour. Maybe not delivered in the best way, but that's British humour.
It certainly wasn't delivered in the best way today, was it?
But I bet you used to cheer and wave your order paper when your party had 56 MPs.
Yeah.
Do you know, the only time that I've regularly attended PMQs was when I was deputy leader and had to. But the vast majority of the time...
You must have stood in for
I don't think,
Mr. Blackford once or twice.
I didn't stand in, no, because there was very few times during that period when actually... Because we ended up in the COVID period, when actually it was Deputy Prime Minister's questions, so it didn't
Let's
really
bring
happen.
it back to today, Ranald. What did you make of it? Because it's always slightly lower energy when there aren't the two main protagonists across the dispatch box from each other.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the phrase I use. David Lammy today, very low energy. You could see he was reading everything for him. He's clearly not been given any latitude by number 10 because of what a mess he made last time. He was given that gig.
Very angry last time.
You know, he's made such a mess of it. Yes, lost his temper, as you said, John. You know, lots of unforced errors, and so clearly not being given any latitude. He's been given his script to everyone that he knows is going to face him in the chamber today. Yeah. And you know, I don't think that's a good look. It was all gags. I mean, look, there's absolutely a place for humour in politics, and I think it's important that politicians across Parliament, across all parties, can share humour. You know, David Cameron did it, Tony Blair did it, Boris Johnson did it, of course he did it. But, you know, there was no substance at all.
How is this the second best that we have, apparently, in the House of Commons?
And that shows the Labour Party today.
You have prompted...
and the Tories, let's, you know...
You've prompted a good question, because I wonder when there have been the deputies, who've been the best pairing? I'm sure John will have an opinion on this.
Angela Rayner up against Oliver Dowden, they were quite good.
Absolutely.
And, of course, John Prescott, when he stood in for Tony Blair. I mean, classic Prescott. But you reminded me...
against William Hague at the time.
Yes, I was going to say...
And he was quite witty.
Yes, I was going to say, William Hague used humour very well in the House of Commons against Blair and Prescott. And as William always said, fat lot of good it did me. Because, of course, he got absolutely trounced in 2001.
Which is quite amusing. David Lammy, do it next time, you think?
Yeah, I wonder if the Tories are making a mistake by rotating. They perhaps, I mean, Alex Burghart's good on the Tory side.
Pick someone and stick with it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that might be better.
Yeah, you can come back as well, John. Appreciate you being here. Kirsty, Ranald, thank you both very much indeed. Great to have you with us this evening. That is it for tonight. I'll be back tomorrow at 7. Up next, it is the UK Tonight with Sarah Jane and me. And then after Sarah Jane at 9 o'clock, it is The World with Yalda, and she'll be continuing the discussion around the PM's trip to China, not least speaking to Jimmy Lai's son about that.